Hello everyone and welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to be painting some autumn leaves, and this time we're going to be having a go at painting water droplets on those leaves. So let's get started. So today I've been thinking about painting leaves, and I'm going to show you some techniques of painting autumn leaves that I don't know if we've done them before, I don't think so. And we won't be using a lot of colours, but we will be using some masking fluid. So if you haven't got any of that, maybe you might want to try and get hold of some. And I'm just sticking this piece of paper down to my board. I'm using this piece of paper because I don't know why really. I could be using a stretched piece. That probably would be sensible, but I'm not. So anyway, there we are. So I am going to draw some leaves, a maple leaf perhaps, and a couple of maple leaves perhaps. Maple leaves have kind of a pointy thing like this going on, I think. You have to forgive me if you feel I've got it wrong, because we don't have them here, and I'm using a photograph to draw from. So it's got sort of like pointy bits. There we are. And perhaps another pointy bit there. And then they have veins. They have one vein that goes down the middle, and then one to each of those pointy bits. So that's that. And we could have another one. We could have another one over here. Like that, and then maybe a smaller one up here. The hardest thing about any painting really is the idea and the composition, I think, and I've never been terribly confident myself about composition. So I know that's the hard bit really. Once you've got some ideas, then that's one of the reasons why I do a lot of very random stuff, because it kind of grows. And the courage comes from actually having the nerve to get started. I do find that that's still, even after all these years, that getting up the nerve to actually put a pencil to paper is quite hard. You just don't, I don't know, is it because you don't want to waste your time, or you don't want to disappoint yourself, or I don't know really. Anyway, so I'm kind of trying to blend the idea of Thanksgiving and Christmas here. So I'm putting some pine needles in the background, and then these maple leaves in as well, and they're obviously going to be on the golden brown kind of colour. Now I need to find my masking fluid. I've got Daniel Smith artist masking fluid here, and what I'm going to do is to save diluting it, I'm going to tip some of it out onto a bowl, onto a little dish like that, and then I'm going to use an old brush to apply the masking fluid with. And you put it on quite thickly, ideally, so that you can get it off again. You can't do this on a very thin paper. This is, I'm using Etival Clairefontaine here, which should be fine when it comes to pulling the masking off. But don't try and do it on sketching paper, anything like cartridge paper, it won't work. So I'm just more or less, probably less rather than more accurately following my sketch. You can download the sketch, which I'll make from the final painting. You can download that from the website dianeantone.com for free if you want. All my sketches are up there for you, and you can just help yourself. Oh yes, and I was going to mention about the website. There's a blog on the website as well, and every day I put up a blog, and occasionally I write something a little bit more detailed. And there is a page there about choosing your paints and why and what kind you probably would benefit from most. And so if you want to read up on which colours to choose or what brand to choose, it's there's quite a bit of information there. Okay, so they are now pretty much covered with masking fluid. If I've missed any bits, it probably won't matter too much. And what I'm going to try and do when after I've done the background and I start to paint the leaves, I'm going to try and paint some water droplets on these leaves, because that always looks very impressive, and I expect you'll be quite interested to see that. Okay, so I need to rinse out my brush, and I will go and wash that because the masking fluid damages the bristles on the brush, not as much as it used to when there was ammonia. Was it ammonia? Yes, it used to smell of ammonia. It used to work a lot better then too, but now they've made it more ecologically sound, and it doesn't work as well. But anyway, these things are sent to trials. So that's going to dry, and meanwhile I'll probably go and have lunch. The colours I'm going to use to start with for the background will be burnt sienna, quinacridone gold, and olive green, or something along those lines, whatever you have that's similar. And then, then we're going to have a sort of greenish brown background. Then I will then I'm going to scratch in these pine needles, and then we will take off the masking fluid, and then we'll paint the leaves. So that's what we're going to do, and I hope it's going to work. Do you like my washi tape? It's quite nice and pink, isn't it? Nice and girly. Okay, so I have to let that dry. That's going to take probably an hour or so. Okay, so back soon. Okay, so I am suitably refreshed with my lunch and my coffee, and I think this is probably dry enough now to go in and paint the background. So I've got 4 colours here now. Actually, I decided that I would add Van Dyke Brown, or you could use burnt umber, or any dark brown really. I want to use that because I'm going to reserve the burnt sienna for the leaves themselves. So this is the brown I'm going to use in the background, mixed in with some olive green, and these 2 colours I'm going to use for the leaves, as well as perhaps some of that. Now, I'm going to put this paint on fairly thickly, because the way I'm going to do these pine needles is I'm going to do the scraping out technique. And for this I have a very expensive tool here, which is very hard to come by. You're going to have to pay a lot for this, actually. So I don't know if all of you will be able to afford it. What it is, it's a family card from IKEA that I've cut in half, and I've trimmed off the ends. So I've got one end that's pointed, sharp, and then a couple of other ends which are slightly less sharp. And you can always modify those by cutting it again to a slightly different angle. And you can use it to scrape into the paint to give a lighter area where it scrapes away the paint. In order to make that work though, you do need to use a fair amount of pigment, otherwise it just doesn't make the indentations that you need. Plus you need to do it at the right moment, because if it's too dry it won't work, and if it's too wet it won't work. So that's the skill involved with that. And excuse me, and I'm just looking for a pair of scissors, because I'm just going to show how you can modify the shape here. So if you just, that's a little bit too wide I think, so I'm just going to cut it down a bit like that. And then I'm hoping I'm going to be able to scrape out some nice shapes. So before I do that, probably I ought to practice. It's always a good idea, isn't it? So I'm going to pop a bit of paint. Let's try it with dark brown on here. Make it quite nice and brown. Something else to remember is that if you're doing a background and you want to make it nice and strong, then don't use too much water, and don't do it wet in wet, because if you do it wet in wet, you'll get some lovely subtle blends, but you will lose a lot of colour. Now, when this is still very wet and you scrape into it, what happens is you get a darker line as the pigment flows into the indentation. If you wait a little while, and it might not be all that long, but just wait a little while and try again, and then you'll find that you get light lines, and both of those are useful for this process. So it doesn't matter if some of them are light and some of them are dark. And you can see it's starting to dry, so you're starting to get a white line. So we'll wait a little bit longer. Meanwhile, you can look at my efforts at water droplets there. I'll show you how to do those shortly. Let's see what happens now. Yeah, it's getting lighter. That means it's drying, sinking in. So how long's that been? About 30 seconds? So I think probably for that amount of paint, I'm going to have to wait about a minute for it to start to dry before I can really scratch out. Yeah, a good minute. There we are, that's the look I'm after. Like that. So when the time comes, you need to go in there and get scratching. Make a good hedgehog, wouldn't it? Look at that. So there we are. And a credit card or IKEA card is perfect for that. So pop that over there. And now I'm going to use my cat's tongue brush, my ZEN ART faux squirrel nylon, in other words, black tulip brush. And what I'm thinking is we'll keep the corners a little bit lighter, have some light areas, and then we'll have some dark areas as well, especially in the middle and around the large leaves. So I'm hoping this is going to be dry enough. So we'll mix up a very dark green and just brush that in. Just make sure you cover all of the all of the paper, especially around the edges. And I'm just going to drop in some burnt sienna as well down here, just to warm it up a bit, because as I'm going along I'm thinking, as you often do when you start these things, you think to yourself, oh, I know what I just said I was going to do, but that doesn't have actually anything to do with what I'm actually going to do. It's a bit like cooking, really. I don't know how many times I go into the kitchen with the intention, I'll say something like, I have no idea what we're going to eat tonight. And then Tamsin will say, I don't know how you managed to think of that. How do you manage to come up with these ideas? I'm like, I don't know, just look in the fridge and see what's in there. And then just put it together in a random fashion, a bit like I do in my paintings. Someone said she liked my devil-may-care attitude towards painting. I think that sums it up. Right, so there we are, that's all of that. And now, of course, I can't see where I had my, what do you call them? So I'll just have to make that all up. I hope you don't mind the scratching noise. So that just kind of gives a nice texture. And you can remember the stems as well, which I painted over. I did that, actually did that on purpose for once. Okay, so now we need to let that dry too. Okay, so this is dry now, so I have to now do the bit that we don't necessarily enjoy all that much, which is to rub off the masking fluid. And we, of course, we have to be careful so that we make sure that we don't rip the paper. And so that piece came off okay, so that's not too bad. So I'm just going to continue with that, and I'll see you back here in a minute once I've rubbed all of this off. Okay, so I have now rubbed off all of the masking fluid, and I'm going to come in with some quinacridone gold and make that the first coat of these maple leaves. And I'm going to put that in fairly wet, and it doesn't really matter if it goes over into the background, and it doesn't matter if it's not particularly even, because we want a, what you might call, slightly random effect. So we'll do that, and then I'm going to pick up some burnt sienna and I'm going to drop that in too, wherever I feel like it, just in bits and pieces, and then some burnt umber around and about. Okay, and then we'll do the next one, same thing, plenty of quinacridone gold burnt sienna. It's just another way of applying it. You can do it bit by bit like this. For something like this, you want to make sure that the paint that you're using is going to lift. In other words, you want it to be possible to take some of the paint off the paper so that you can do the droplets, if you want to have a go at the droplets. And the last one down here. If you want to make some areas a bit darker, just once it's started to dry a little bit, you can add a little bit more. And you could also add some green too. If you really want to make some dark areas, adding some olive green to the brown will help with that. And now we need to let that dry. I might do a bit of spatter on there. I might put some quinacridone gold into those leaves. Perhaps a bit of burnt sienna. I might put a bit more green also into the background. Yeah, and now we do need to let that dry. Now the painting's dry, and we're going to look at putting 1 or 2 water drops on here. So you want to go for the areas where it's darkest, really. And then just with a damp brush, just basically make a circle and wet the paint in a sort of circular shape and blot it out. And you'll get a very light area showing up straight away. And that's where you're going to put your water drop. You can make it oval if you like, or teardrop shape, or round, whatever. I'll make a few different ones, and then perhaps we'll put another little one next to it, because it always looks more convincing when there's more than one. And if you've used good quality paper, reasonably good, it doesn't have to be pure cotton. In fact, if anything, you're better off with cellulose for a painting like this. But you need paint that doesn't stain, so don't use any of the phthalo colours because they won't lift up. But you should be okay with burnt umber, burnt sienna, olive green, quinacridone gold. They all lift up, as you can see. And just go over it a few times, just very lightly wetting the paint till you can see that it's starting to lift, and then dab it out with a piece of paper towel. like that. And you could use a mask to do that. Don't mean a medical mask, I mean like a stencil, but you don't really need to, because you'll find that a round shape will come up very readily if you just do it like that. And you'll soon find that you get addicted to this very quickly. Let's put one up here, otherwise this one is going to be lonely. Don't want too many because we don't want it to look like it's got measles. But you see how white that looks once you've lifted that out a little bit. Okay, we could put another one on that one, but I'll probably just paint one of them for you for illustration. And I'm just going to pop the hairdryer on there to dry those off. So once they're dry, now the easiest way of doing this is to look and see what colour you've got behind the water drop 2B, and then pick up some paint. Need a tester here. It needs to be, and this is the wrong brush. Wrong brush, no good. A small brush, need a small brush. Very small brush, yes, one like this. This is one of my DRAWELL rounds. This is a number 1. Don't use a number 1 very often. So yeah, you need a fairly reasonable, decently dark, the same kind of colour that you've got behind, and then you're just going to emphasise the shadow. Sort of go 3/4 of the way around, like that. And make sure that you fade it off a little bit. And then on the top part, you need to leave one section really light, and then you want a little bit of shadow on the other side. So don't go right to the edge, but just very lightly, only halfway across, and vary it a bit. And then let it dry, because you can't always tell how it's going to dry. And then if you want, you can put some white to lighten up the light area. You might or you might not need that. And then you need a little white highlight here. And then you have to let it dry, and then you'll know whether or not it's worked. And if it hasn't, then you come back and you do it again. And for the one next to it that's much smaller, we probably don't need to do anything except just increase the shadow. You do need to be patient and let them dry. And you do probably need a fairly small brush. Okay, so like I said, you need to let that dry and then we'll come back and take a look at that once they have dried. Now, one other thing I want to do just is to put in a few dark pine needles. So like either you could say they were shadows, and then maybe behind some of these ones you could just drop in a little bit more dark there, make them stand out a bit more. And then the other thing is, if you feel that the shape has gone a bit wonky, you can always just go in and sharpen up the points a little bit like this. So for those people who love to fiddle, this is perfect because this is where you actually need to fiddle. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a minute and give it a bit of thought and then come back and we'll see where we're at. And that's pretty much it. I have added a few spatters in dark green and white, and this washi tape's coming off quite nicely. It's always fun when you take the tape off and you get a better idea then of what you've actually done. You could do much smaller ones of this and make them into greetings cards or something like that for Thanksgiving. You could obviously do calligraphy over the top of it as well. And you can play around with the edges. You can lift if you feel that the shape's gone a little bit wrong. If you use these colours and a decent kind of paper, you can always make adjustments. So don't let anyone tell you that if you paint watercolour you can't ever correct anything, because that's not entirely true. It's a bit harder perhaps than it is with acrylic, but it can still be done. So there we are. There's the final painting. I hope you enjoyed that. Give it a try. It's not all that difficult. Some very good techniques there, lifting out and shadows and backgrounds and all sorts of things there for you to play around with. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel, and also perhaps consider channel membership, which is a very reasonable way of getting just that little bit extra for your painting journey. And don't forget to check out DianeAntone.com if you want to download sketches of any of the paintings that we've done together over the last year or so. And also take a look at my blog, where I talk about materials, as I mentioned earlier on in this video, talking about what paints that you might want to buy and so on and so forth. And on all my blog entries you'll find lots of information about the materials that I use in these paintings. So hopefully that will be useful for you. So I'll say goodbye for now, and I really do need a cup of tea, and I think the cat's been busy in his litter tray. So I will see you again soon. Happy painting everyone. Bye bye for now. Bye bye.